All right then. Well, welcome everybody to the 8th annual event. Kind of feel bad we can't all get together and meet. There you go. This is such as 2020. Just a quick reminder, I'm Jay Gilbertson. I'm the manager of the East Dakota Water Development District. We're a regional entity of government here in eastern South Dakota dealing with a variety of water issues up and down the Big Sioux River Basin. My topic today is a look at some water quality trends in the Big Sioux River. I have the question mark in there because it's not entirely clear that we have trends in some situations, but we'll go ahead. Of course, first and foremost, the question is, why do we care? Well, whether you recreate or drink the water, all of it comes from a lot of it will come from the Big Sioux River, and we'd kind of like it to be clean. Certainly that hose water looks pretty good. I've got my doubts about the water there in Split Rock Creek that are being paddled on, but it works for what is being done. Quick overview, we're going to touch on beneficial uses, the things we use the water for, or at least we would like to. Talk a little bit about how we know what we know about the river, and then finally go through some summary reports on the status of our waters and the condition of things. Okay, first, talk about beneficial uses. These are assigned by a state board. It's the Board of Water Management. Basically establish how a water body is intended to be used. And then for each one of those uses, there are some number of numeric or narrative criteria that are used to sort of determine whether or not that use is being met. In South Dakota, we have 11 such beneficial uses. They're numbered here. I've highlighted a couple. The first, obviously, domestic water supply is an important consideration. If you're pulling water out of that water body to drink, it's good that it be clean. Choices 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 all deal with fish life. In the Big Sioux Basin, it's primarily the warm water variety, 4, 5, and 6. For most of us, it's the recreational use of the river that is important. Those are items 7 and 8, and to translate, immersion means swimming. And then 9, 10, and 11 are sort of catch-all categories, provide just sort of general suitability for these major bunches. Quick run through on some of these. If you're domestic water supply water, we'll look at total coliform bacteria, we'll look at nitrates, total dissolved solids, et cetera, et cetera. Currently in the Big Sioux River Basin, no one is using the Big Sioux River as a drinking water source directly, but in the picture in the lower right-hand side is the intake plant for the city of Sioux Falls. If and when they need to, they can turn that on and pull river water into the system. Right now, it's just cheaper to get it elsewhere. On the fisheries side of things, we typically look at DO and ammonia, total suspended solids, temperature, and so forth. Total suspended solids, or TSS, are the big issues in the Big Sioux River Basin, although down at the bottom, mercury is becoming an issue as well. We'll talk about that a little later on. On the recreational side, we've got two classes, immersion and limited contact. As I said before, immersion is swimming. Limited contact is that coming in contact with the water, whether you're boating or fishing or something like that, basically where you don't intend to put yourself completely under the water is limited contact. Basically every lake in South Dakota, at least all the big ones, are assigned the uses of immersion and limited contact recreation. The number 9, fish, wildlife propagation, recreation, stock watering, sort of the generic catch-all activity, touches on a bunch of different things. It's sort of a very low bar sort of situation. Nitrates there at 50 and 88 versus 10 for drinking water and so forth. And again, mercury's here. It's starting to come in and at least identify itself as a problem in certain areas. And finally, irrigation and commerce and industry waters, typically having to do with industrial uses, or as it says, irrigation, conductivity, sodium, total TDS. Not really much in the way of problems with those issues here in South Dakota. So those are the beneficial uses that are assigned or options that are out there. Now, how do we know about the condition of the water? Well, there's an awful lot of folks out there collecting information. First and foremost, the biggest system operational right now is South Dakota DENR's Ambient Water Quality Network, WQM. We need to work on getting fancier names for these things. Water Quality Monitoring, WQM. We need to get a little more original, I think. There are currently about 150, 155 monitoring stations statewide. Depending on the situation, they may be monitored monthly, quarterly, or just seasonally in certain situations. And there's a host of different parameters that are monitored. At this point, we probably have the second biggest network in South Dakota. Under normal circumstances, we're monitoring water quality at about 50 different surface water locations up and down the district and a little bit outside to the south. Typically bi-weekly or twice a month sampling on the surface waters. Recently, the state has instituted a new sampling protocol called rotating basins. It's intended to provide a broader and a better foundation on which we can gather and have information for reasons I'll get to in just a second. In the initial run for the rotating basins project, they've targeted the Big Sioux River Basin. And although there are 42 monitoring sites, see if yes, the graphics are working. The blue circle is what we were already doing, the 42 sites. Basically, it's pretty much a total wash or almost a perfect fit for match. So we're not getting 92 locations sampled this time of year. We're still doing about 50. There's just a tremendous amount of overlap with what we're currently doing. And this will continue on in the Big Sioux River through 2021, at which point it'll move elsewhere in the state as to be determined. And finally, there are any number of federal, state, university, and local government monitoring efforts that are underway. So there's a fair amount of information out there available to evaluate what we have. And there's some fancy pictures of various people out collecting data, whether from the shore or from a boat or where have you. The map, I guess I shouldn't apologize because I picked it, but anyway, there's a bunch of little red dots and numbers on there. That's the statewide network, the WQM sites that are available out there. For those of you who have been around for a while might recognize a few of the people as having long since left East Dakota, but a good picture is a good picture, but I did try and bring a few of the new folks in. Okay, what happens with this information? Well, every 2 years, the state has to summarize this information and pass it along to EPA. It's a requirement of the Federal Clean Water Act, sections 305B and 303D. Since the late or mid 2000s, the state has put both of those together in what's called the integrated report, combined 303D, 305B report. That comes out every 2 years, 2004, 2006, so on and so on. The 2020 integrated report was approved by the US EPA earlier this year, I think early April, and it's available online. This is the summary document. If you want to know how what the water's like in South Dakota, in theory, this will tell you, in theory. In terms of determining if the water is good, we had talked earlier about the designated beneficial uses and the various criteria. In the integrated report, if a particular water body is considered to be supporting for its particular use, what it means is 10% or fewer of any samples that have been collected, or no more than 10% violate the standard. If it's nitrate, it can't be too high. If it's dissolved oxygen, it can't be too low. And if fewer than 10% of the samples are problematic, then the water is considered to be supporting. Conversely, if you've got enough data, if more than 10% of the samples violate the standard, then that water is considered to be non-supporting. Now, 15% is more than 10%, which means 85% of the samples were deemed to be okay, but still that's the designation that would be done. We have a fair number of water bodies where the actual status is unknown. Typically, that's a result of insufficient data. Not everybody is out there collecting water quality information where we'd like them to do it. or at least not where individual members of the public would like to have it done. It's not easy, it's not inexpensive, and there's often a paucity of information. One of the more common unknowns would be bacteria in lakes or really rivers. Bacteria samples, unlike most of the other parameters we measure, typically have a holding time requirement. In other words, if you collect it today, you have to get it to the lab within 24 hours. All the other samples or all the other things that we're testing for typically can be held for anywhere up to from 7 to 30 days. And so getting those bacteria samples to, to the lab can be difficult at times. And so that information tends to be lost or simply not collected because of the difficulties. I would stress for those that might be tempted to do otherwise, unknown does not mean it's unimpaired. It means we don't know. If you don't know if it's bad, you can't assume that it's good. Just putting that out there for most folks. And something else about the DNR, about the monitoring side of things or the support, non-support, is that these determinations are basically binary. It either does or doesn't meet the criteria. And in some cases, and I've got just a couple of examples up here, that can have some interesting, I think, important implications. On the support side, we'll look at nitrate there on the left. Ideally, we'll find little or no nitrate in our drinking water or surface water supplies, particularly drinking water. And most laboratories have got a detection limit down in the range of 1/10 of a part per million, or 0.04 parts per million. It's pretty low level. So a non-detect clearly would be a good thing to get. By the same token, where the standard is 10 milligrams per liter, reading that came back at 9.9 for nitrate would still be considered passing. Conversely, 10.1, which is not appreciably different than 9.9 and probably within the error bar of the machine that did the calculation, is non-support and is treated much the same way as a sample that was an order of magnitude too high. And so support, non-support simply means you're on one side of the boundary line or another. It doesn't really tell us how far away from that line it might be. For that, you really need to look at the actual data itself. And again, on the right, similar comparison for E. coli bacteria for immersion recreation, standards 235 colony forming units per 100 milliliters of sample. Again, barely detect at 10 would be ideal, but 235 is the limit, and that would be considered supporting. Whereas one more colony would be bad, but it is at times not uncommon to get samples that actually come back at too big. The nitrate, we talked about a lower detection limit in some of the biologic counts, the bacteria counts. There's an upper limit on how many units they can sample or they can count, at least not without a lot of dilution activity. So, but again, super exceedance or barely doesn't really come through in the integrated report. Just a few quick highlights from the 2020 report. The assessment on the rivers and streams side looked at a little over 10,000 miles of perennial stream and 87,474 of intermittent streams and rivers. From 2018 to the present, I want to say about 700 of those got shifted from intermittent to perennial. I'm not sure exactly how that worked out, but there you go. Of that 10,000 or so that were assessed or that were available, a little over half were assessed. Of those, only 22% supported all these signed beneficial uses. And this is actually down about 3 or 4 percentage points from the 2018 cycle. Obviously, then 78% didn't support one or more of the assigned beneficial uses. And again, a given water body can be assigned multiple beneficial uses, and so you can maybe pass one or support one and not support the other. The big issues on the surface water side, tend to settle around total suspended solids, coming either from agricultural or natural sources, and then bacteria, which again impact the recreational uses. A good deal of the problematic numbers are coming from livestock. That's not an indictment of the animal industry. It's just a recognition of reality. It's what we have. And certainly wildlife are a contributing factor as well. There's also human bacteria involved, but the majority is coming from our four-footed friends. On the lakes and reservoir side, 575 that are assigned aquatic and or recreational use purposes. 147 have been assessed, representing about 2/3 of the total acres of lakes. So it's all the big ones. Here, unfortunately, only about 9% passed all of the assigned beneficial uses, which leaves 91% that did not. From an aesthetic standpoint, the big problem are algal blooms and nutrients, which tend to come from both internal loading, i.e. material that's already in the lake itself, along with watershed non-point sources, and then mercury, which is showing up now a lot in fish flesh. This bioaccumulates, and when it exceeds a certain level in fish, then they are considered, it's encouraged that you not eat. Basically, for mercury waters or mercury in South Dakota, we have two classes of waters: those that have been tested for mercury and found wanting, and those that haven't been tested yet. Very few mercury tests come back with a green light. So let's spend the last 10 minutes or so talking about some of the results. What I'm going to go through here are the segments of the Big Sioux River with the status, support, non-support status from a number of different integrated reports. For historical perspective, we've got data from the 2000 report and then the last 4 integrated reports. Again, the Big Sioux major water body is actually divided up into 16 different segments. Those of you with sharp eyes will catch that near the tail end, we actually end up at segment 17. That's because segment 9, I think it's segment 9. Anyway, one of the segments, 2 segments in Sioux Falls were combined. So we're missing one there in the middle. And you can see the explanation here. So for starters, headwaters, the first segment, headwaters of the Big Sioux down to Lake Kampesca. The format here will be the same. I'll just go briefly. In this case, we've got 4 assigned beneficial uses: warm water, semi-permanent fish life, limited contact recreation, and then sort of the generic fish, wildlife, and irrigation. On the support status, if the year is in green, it means it supported that year. If it's in red, it did not. And then if there were problems, the presumed culprit is on the far right-hand side. So in the upper headwaters, back in 2000, things were generally pretty good. Over the last half decade or so, we're seeing issues with total or dissolved oxygen, and then also E. coli. And those have been fairly persistent through the last 4 cycles. And just an example, this is one of our monitoring sites, what we would call R4. It's the road out to the Sioux Conifer Road north of Watertown. It's USGS stream gauging station. Just to look at a little bit of the data that we've got, this is bacteria from R14, not R4, I guess R14. Data going back to, well, looks like late 2013 or 2014 field season. Variety of dots. The little arrow is intended to represent the upper limit, sort of the threshold for limited contact recreation. And by and large, most of those dots have fallen below that. But every once in a while, one sneaks up and above, and there's just enough to meet the qualification. Of note is that that trend line is going down, albeit rather slowly. On total suspended solids, which have an impact on the fish life, and again, the standard's 158, which is off the chart. Pretty much every sample we're collecting is coming in under, well under the standard, and that's good. And again, a weighted or a trend line is showing a pretty good decrease, which is great. And finally, nitrates, we're holding steady, but they're all pretty much falling under 1 part per million, and the drinking water standard is 10, so we're in good shape on that front. Working our way a little farther south, Lake Kampesca to Willow Creek, this is basically the Watertown segment. Again, very much the same applied or same beneficial uses, and support status is about the same. Dissolved oxygen is an issue in the upper Big Sioux River Basin, along with some E. coli, and that has persisted. The generic fish and wildlife and irrigation issues haven't been a problem for some time. Getting below Watertown down to Stray Horse, northern Hamlin County. Here the TSS and the DO issue goes away. So warm water fish life really doesn't have any troubles. We are exceeding the limited contact recreation standard for E. coli, though, in this segment, and have been for fairly consistently. Not greatly, but enough to beat the qualify for non-support. Stray Horse to near Volga. Again, you can kind of see this. Warm water, the fish life was doing well. 2018, we had a TSS problem. That actually went away in 2020, but was replaced with issues with dissolved oxygen. Limited contact, good in 2000, 2014, 2018. DO was an issue, or is an issue in 16 and 20, and E. coli was a problem. So we can count a loss, or it's gotten better with regard to bacteria in the last cycle, but not entirely so. And again, 9 and 10 are in good shape. Another segment, again, near Volga to Brookings. Warm water fish life is the issue. Total suspended solids are sort of a low-grade persistent problem in this region, have been for a very long time. From Brookings down, same thing. These are not huge exceedances, but they're just enough to trigger non-compliance, and they've been very consistent. Another look at another data set from this particular area. This is the USGS gauge here just south of Brookings. On the E. coli side, see things bouncing around. This data set actually goes back to the mid-2000s, looks like October or 2006. Again, we occasionally get some pretty high spikes. Most are staying under that 400 range or under the 200 range, and we're in pretty good shape. And again, a trend line would suggest things are getting better, albeit very slowly. Total suspended solids, again, all for the most part well below the standard of 158, although we certainly have enough to keep it problematic. And then finally, nitrates, again, well below the drinking water standard, but again, climbing slowly over time. Brookings through, basically, this is Moody County. Domestic water supply starts here. It's in good shape, at least as far as standards go. TSS has started to come back, and mercury is a bit of an issue here. And we can talk about that later on if need be. Mercury is measured a sort of a different way from everything else, and so once it gets in the system, it tends to stay there for a long period of time. Limited contact, had some problems, but in the most recent test, we were in good shape. As far as the E. coli goes, and again, a 9, which is normally all green, this is a mercury fish issue. Another data set here from the Del Rapids area, E. coli, a little different scales here. Quite a few are down near the bottom, but you can see that first bar is 2000. They're there, and we can get some pretty big spikes. TSS, for the most part, we're staying below the 158 standard and dropping. And nitrates are, again, climbing, again, generally higher, bigger numbers now, but still well below the standard, but they're headed in the wrong direction. Quick run through town. This is another segment that has mercury information, segment 8. So we've got issues with fish flesh on the fish side of things. And now E. coli rears its head on the immersion recreation. Basically, you got to have no E. coli to pass the immersion test, and that's just not going to happen. We got close in 2014 where limited contact was okay, but it's kind of tough the farther down the system you go. I-90 to the diversion return. Again, domestic is good. TSS or warm water fish, immersion and limited contact are not good and have stayed that way for a long time. From the diversion to the wastewater plant, the drinking water standard drops off, warm water and the recreational uses are impaired and have been that way. And in fact, that particular setup persists for quite a long ways. One last quick data set to look at. This is a R13 site over south of Brandon, again on the E. coli front. Again, mostly low numbers, trending down-ish, sort of, but a lot more of them kind of sneaking up above the standard. Oh, well, that thing's going to go off. We'll never know. Total suspended solids. Earlier on, we were well above the 158 standard, but as we go farther down the system, we're getting better. Again, nitrates climbing in general and higher numbers, but still well below the drinking water standard. And the last couple of stretches, Brandon to 9 Mile, 9 Mile to Fairview, repeat again, Fairview to Alcester, Alcester to Indian Creek, and finally Indian Creek down to the mouth. All segments basically below Sioux Falls have got TSS issues with warm water fish life and excess bacteria for recreational uses. The kind of a summary on this, just a few things to touch on. The E. coli, which is really the biggie, more often than not, we're going to find it at or above a designated use. In the case of IR and immersion recreation, we're typically well above that number. And so we've got issues. Up basin, upper part of the basin, there's some downward trends. The lower basin is sort of a mixed bag. We've just got a lot of material accumulating down here. Total suspended solids are mostly at or below the standard, so those tend to hug right around the area. They're mostly decreasing. However, they're sort of starting from higher numbers and the farther down the basin you go. And so even though they're coming down everywhere, they were coming down from higher numbers down south. And finally, nitrates generally were below the drinking water criteria, which is good. But if you saw from some of those charts, they're increasing with time all the way along. Where do we go from here? Well, it took 140 years to get here. Nothing's going to happen overnight. If we can hold things steady, static water quality would be a win. At least things aren't getting worse. And in many instances, water might still be bad, but it's not as bad. And then finally, my last poke for a little more regulatory beef behind some things. There are limits to what you can do with all volunteer programs. If all you can do is offer somebody to change their actions, it sometimes is a little difficult. And with that, I think I'm done.
Hi, I am Alexa Cruz, as Troy said, working for the Big Sioux River Project. Many of you are probably familiar with the Big Sioux River Project, and if you are, you're probably wondering why Barry isn't giving this presentation and who is this new person. And so Barry just gave this presentation over to me this time, and he is around and I think would be able to answer any questions that I might not be able to at the end of this presentation. And while I'm still a fairly new hire, I am hoping in some ways to be a representative of this project moving forward. So we'll jump in with a brief introduction for those of you who might not be as familiar with the Big Sioux River Project. We are a part of the East Dakota Water Development District, and we partner with organizations to provide agricultural producers with another option for getting conservation on the land. We aim to restore and protect the beneficial uses of the Big Sioux River and its tributaries that lie in South Dakota. So we do this by promoting and implementing best management practices in the watershed, and those reduce things like sediment loading, bacterial contamination, along with meeting a bunch of other TMDLs developed for the river. We do work closely with producers to come up with different education, tools, and programs that allow the land to stay productive for them. but also contribute to water health. So since our goal is to improve the water quality for the Big Sioux River, we primarily provide assistance with programs that help us achieve that goal. However, the practices that are good for water quality are also often good for soil, wildlife, and they just contribute to a better and more successful and sustainable farming practice overall. Of course, we couldn't carry out any of these practices without funding and assistance from our partners, for which we are extremely grateful, so thank you. The table you see here reflects our proposed and final budget for segment 3, which is now complete. And thanks to everyone who contributed, we have had a very successful 5 years of implementing conservation practices. So as I mentioned in the last slide, we've completed segment 3. The Big Sioux River project is broken up into segments. And one of the things that this allows us to do is to partner with different conservation districts to target certain parts of the watershed. This August, we finished up segment 3, which spanned the last 5 years and was in conjunction with the Moody County Conservation District. We've now entered segment 4, which we are working on with the Minnehaha Conservation District. The project has been ongoing for 20 years now, and entering a new segment is a good opportunity for us to look back on what we've accomplished and appreciate the sort of success that we've had, but it's also an opportunity to look forward and hit the refresh button and outline some of our new goals for the project, what we want to do with it moving forward. Now that you have a bit more background, beyond the introduction, this presentation is going to have 2 main parts, and the first is to give an update, much like Barry typically would, of the project's accomplishments thus far, like in the last year, but especially the last segment, since we're closing out segment 3. This second part of my presentation is to share with you our plan to further revitalize the project and to build more community awareness, engagement, etc., just on the urban side of things. So here we have a chart that shows our original best management practice goals and their completion rates for segment 3. This chart is a lot to look at once, so we're actually going to break it down into 3 different objectives and 7 task categories and look at each of those individually and just kind of have a little more focus on them. BMP installation is our first objective. This includes anything that we're going to do to get conservation on the ground. For this segment in particular, we installed BMPs targeted at identified high priority sub-watersheds like the Skunk Creek and other tributaries. So our first task is livestock nutrient management. This is an important task group since we can have a lot of fecal and E. coli bacteria reduction and positive impact in the watershed while focusing on just a few targeted areas with a few producers. We exceeded all of our goals for animal waste management systems and their implementation. For us, that means we've done 2 hog facilities that were constructed to replace sort of outdated operations with outside lots and handling areas. This is to address like waste runoff concerns, and the other 15 operations were deep pit or manure pack barns that reduced open lots that previously lacked that waste storage. So these are good practices in part because they help us reduce surface runoff of bacteria, TSS, and nutrient loading. So it's an important one. Our second task is riparian area protection. This is one of our biggest task groups that we focus a lot on. Our goal is to provide resources to livestock owners to limit or prevent their livestock from accessing impaired water bodies like the Big Sioux River and to provide clean alternative water sources for those livestock. This is another important group that includes our SRAM and RAM programs, grazing management, water system developments, among other practices. Over the past segment, our SRAM and RAM projects have been continually refined to remain current because of changing technology or the economy, different producer needs, and like just that our water quality goals have changed. So one of the exciting things that we have seen in this segment is that the SRAM and RAM programs are basically selling themselves, and we've had a lot of interest and momentum that we are excited to carry into segment 4 for those. So something we're excited about for segment 4 as well is a working lands easements. This is another chance to put marginal pasture lands into a program that will still have a management plan, but we're going to retain like hanging and grazing use, and it'll allow us to partner with organizations such as Pheasants Forever. And I just wanted to highlight our SRAM and RAM programs again here, because these are some of the really big ones for us. So you can see our overall like goal for this segment. We've really blown that away, so that's great. We've had a great 2020 sign up as well, and we already have signups that we're looking at for next year. And you can see the map on the right hand side of the screen there. Everything that's in black shows land that we have enrolled in SRAM. The red is RAM and yellow is CRP. So lots of good work. It would be so cool someday to see those buffers around the entirety of the watershed, but we're working towards that. Another thing we want to show is just so you can see visually like what SRAM is doing is this is a pasture that in April 2013 had pretty eroded banks. It was not so great looking, but I'm just going to click through these slides to see how it's changed until today after being enrolled in the SRAM program. And you can see in 2019 we had some severe flooding, 2018 as well, and things are recovering and being pretty resilient, which is so cool, and maybe wouldn't have happened if we still had cows in the river there. So anyway, moving on, our third task is cropland best management practices. Terracing helps reduce total suspended solid transport to surface water. Again, as I said before, we experienced really wet weather during segment 3, which badly degraded some terraces. So those most producers that indicated wanting terrace work done were for new constructions. Grassed waterways are becoming a little less popular because tiling has eliminated a lot of those areas we might have had as potential program acres. Filter strips, cover crops, all good. We fell short on our pollinator habitat goals. Largely this is due to like seeding costs, but we're hoping there will be more interest in that in the future, especially maybe in some urban areas as well for segment 4. Our fourth task was urban best management practices, which we fell a bit short on implementing. We wanted to do several water quality treatment structures in Sioux Falls, but this the extensive flooding in 2018 and 19, like again, really pushed back some of those urban improvements that we wanted to do. We just had to reprioritize there. Another factor is that reducing the impairments in rural areas is less expensive overall based on the land's use. We can have like this great impact over a greater land area, thanks to our producers who are willing to work with us on conservation and that larger land area. And we still want to do these, some of these interesting practices where more people can see it. There's just not as much land area. But the city of Sioux Falls has resumed talks for a few of the projects that we were looking at doing, but to do them in segment 4. So our next objective is information and education, which includes our fifth task, which is public information and outreach. We met our goals for public outreach during segment 3 through tours, meetings, articles, advertisements, and presentations, and we are serving our producers and our professional partners fairly well in this regard, but we would like to expand our reach for segment 4 to include, again, that general public, that urban areas, especially Sioux Falls, and we'll talk more about that in the second part of my talk. Our third and final objective is monitoring and evaluation, which includes water quality monitoring and the GERTs and final reports. And so task 6, water quality monitoring, was completed at 33 river and tributary sites. It's so important because sampling and modeling can show us how successful the project is, like how well our best management practices are doing to kind of reduce different impacts on the river. Water quality sampling was increased during the last half of segment 2 and last half of segment 2 and then the first half of segment 3 to satisfy requirements for National Water Quality Initiative standards, which was established in the Skunk Creek Basin. Our preliminary results indicate a decrease in those bacteria levels in locations where we've established BMPs, so that's pretty cool. And it's especially great when that Skunk Creek has been delisted for total suspended solids this time around. So the East Dakota Water Development District and South Dakota DENR completed all of the water quality sampling for us, or we have used their information. So, and then our final task, number 7, I'm not dedicating a slide to, but it's the GERTs and final reports, which fulfill our reporting requirements by basically just like summarizing our project results, the impact of our BMPs on water quality, that sort of thing. So if you'd like to read more on that, you can certainly request more information. Anyway, as you can see, we're going to be moving on into the second part of my talk. The project is rooted alongside our conservation partners in eastern South Dakota, and today we are mostly assisting ag producers in implementing those conservation practices, but the health of our watershed is resting with more than just our farmers. In segment 4, we are going to be putting more emphasis on that second objective we talked about, which was information and education. The Big Sioux River Project is aiming to apply digital media education and have this awareness campaign for its water quality conservation efforts, and we want to engage more of the community that we serve. We want to serve all of our stakeholders, everyone who cares about the river. So who knows about our project? We have these strong roots with our producers and therefore more rural populations, and we're a vital option for producers to do their part for conservation, but we want to basically like revitalize the project to make it a fixture in more urban centers, especially the community of Sioux Falls, and have that sort of buy-in from a larger group of people. We have this history with our producers where our programs are selling themselves. We have people coming to us to enroll, which gives us this like creative freedom to sort of do more, right? We're meeting those, so we want to go beyond. But there are differences in how we would implement best management practices in a rural setting and scale, in the scale at which we can do those same things in the city, as I had mentioned before with our urban BMPs. Reducing impairments in rural areas is so different. So how does this translate to an urban setting? We want people to be able to like safely recreate in the river in and around Sioux Falls, but we're not going to get there just with producers, because this, any of our urban settings are at fault for pollution as well. One of our major lines of defense to lower an urban center's negative impact on the river is to target individual attitudes and actions. We haven't really told the story of the Big Sioux River Project as well as we would have liked to, and we want to share it with this population of people and show that everyone has a part to play in the health of the Big Sioux River. So we're working on an awareness campaign that shows that although everyone is part of the problem for water quality, everyone can also be a part of the solution. And building an awareness campaign starts at first with a name, and probably not the most people remember the Big Sioux River Project by its name, but you probably, if you're involved in the water quality conversation in the watershed, you probably know Barry and what he does and how he, works with producers and provides this like individualized attention so that we can really work and make the programs work for the producers as well. But I can't necessarily market this very well as the Barry Berg Project, so we are giving it that Big Sioux River Project title and really wanting to push that. This is not something that just producers can do. It's something that everyone can be a part of. So first, as with any campaign, we kind of need to start with an online presence. I'm assuming basically everyone has a smartphone. You either fall into a category of like, you're like, yeah, of course everyone has a smartphone. Duh, I have one. Who doesn't? Or you're probably pretty proud that you've resisted getting some sort of smart device up until this point. But no one can escape the internet. We're all doing this digitally right now. And 4 out of 5 of us own a smartphone. And the average smartphone user spends more than 3 hours on their phone per day. And if you've used analytics tools like screen time, you might have been surprised the first time you ever use it, just how much time you're spending on your device. And this photo in the slide is probably pretty familiar for everyone. People are on their devices even when they're enjoying time outdoors in nature, trying to they're connecting through a screen still. So we want to harness the power that is in everyone's pocket to connect people more closely with the environment that they're exploring, especially along the river. But we can't do that if people don't have like a central hub to visit us at. So we still have all this information to share, and these days we need to share it in new and creative ways that can capture people's interest, thanks to so many people spending their time online. We don't necessarily need a physical space on the map, but to share our project. And instead of an office, our virtual hub is a website. So in order to foster our project's growth and strengthen public awareness, by late spring or early summer of 2021, we will have launched a highly visible website where anyone, whether it's a producer or a curious member of the public, can go learn about water quality and the work that we're doing with our partners and in and on the Big Sioux River and its tributaries. So today, we don't have that, but we are moving towards that goal very swiftly. You can't talk about the internet again without talking about like our handheld devices and especially social media. They're basically inseparable from each other at this point. Even though we are the largest watershed project in the state, our current social media presence is not really existent. So we'd like to get on that as well. The Big Sioux River project is going to be branded in a way that's easily recognizable and shareable. We're going to have social media presence on all major platforms. With screen time basically at an all-time high this year, it makes sense to bring our presence online where we can have easily accessible information to a wider audience. And social media isn't just a good tool for communication. The analytics across those platforms can also help us measure and gauge changing attitudes and interest in our project and its efforts, not just with the general public, but also with our producers. There are people using these services online as well. So that's something we're looking at. The pandemic has given us, again, even more reasons to harness the power of social media to tell our story as a Big Sioux River project and serve a different group of stakeholders on the river. It's a really awesome time to be doing this because more people than ever are, engaging with the recreation areas that we have on this side of the state. Like for example, and this is just a personal anecdote, but I was looking for another kayak early this summer to add to my fleet, and I called around and kayaks were out of stock at many of the sporting goods stores in Sioux Falls. So that's really cool. That means people are getting out there and connecting really closely with the river. Geocaching has become more popular. There are various types of scavenger hunts that have sprung up in our area, from the Siouxland Libraries hosted scavenger hunts to trivia hikes to downtown Sioux Falls Digital Passport. Through these types of modes and more, we've got really great opportunity for place-based education that we can do just through we can start doing through online now. Another way to bridge that gap between technology, education, and our river is citizen science photo points where people can share how a spot is changing over time through social media and location tags. We can do photo contests to engage a certain group of people who like to spend time outside and capture good images. Live streaming an educational video or lesson from the side of the river, using members of the community who might want to teach about a specific topic, or creating more formal educational videos for YouTube to show, show progress of a project and give more time on time updates. We also want to work on a mobile application that will allow the public to check current river conditions and get real-time measurements of water quality in order to plan their recreational activities through the summer. I think it'd be so cool if there was like, along with your text message or your news notification or something, there'd be a notification that pops up and says like the weather and water conditions are great today. It's a great day to get out on the river. Like that would be so amazing. So we're looking at doing something like that. And yeah, since so many of our awesome outdoor spaces are along the river, we have a great opportunity to connect with people through that. So people are, you know, getting outside, trying new activities, and they're doing it with their friends and their family, and we would be able to provide another opportunity for some new things to do for them. So along with using digital media, I think as time goes on, it's incredibly important for us to envision and plan for the future that we want to see, no matter how big that is. It's hard right now with so much up in the air to know exactly what, you know, this summer is going to look like. But it includes, you know, visioning for the future looks like including planning for educational community-wide events, watershed tours, in-classroom learning opportunities, all of this too, because like buy-in from like targeting this younger generation can be so powerful when it comes to fostering like defining attitudes about the importance of the environment and the role that we play in it. We want to dream of these things, but we're also preparing for the world as it is now is permanently, you know, changed. We think like smaller group activities, digital learning spaces, and taking things outdoors are going to continue to be part of the norm for the time being. So that is what is being focused on at the moment. What I've mentioned here are just some of the exciting things that you can look forward to with the Big Sioux River Project in segment 4 as we look to expand awareness for the project. And I just wanted to say in closing, thank you to all of our partners for their assistance in working towards our shared goal of just a healthier watershed. And thank you for choosing to watch my presentation in particular. And now I will open things up for questions, either for myself or, like I said, I might be able to direct questions to Barry if I'm not quite sure if I can answer, but we'd be happy to chat further, and you can email either of us at these links. So yeah, thanks for listening.
Okay, sorry, I was having a little technical difficulty there for a second.
No worries.
All right, well, thank you, Alexa. We did get a couple questions here, or at least one I'll relay to you. And any attendees, please relay any questions you may have via the chat function, and I'll get them over to Alexa. All right. First question here is, which partnerships do you hope to grow as you enter segment 4?
Yeah, so along with working with our current list of partners, we are looking at working with some other more independent organizations as well. I know I'm sure Barry could lend more to this, but I know that for sure one of the partnerships we're looking at is again that working lands easement with Pheasants Forever. So we really like collaboration. It just allows us to do so much more together. So yeah.
Excellent. I did send a request over to Barry to unmute if he has anything to add to it. So
cheers.
Second question here that just came in as well. Does your project go to and include the headwaters near Summit? What implementations taking place in the upper basin?
So our project area actually doesn't cover the upper basin. Our project is the central and lower Big Sioux River watershed. So I can't speak to what's being done in the upper basin. Sorry.
That is the extent of the questions from the chat. We'll keep it open here for a couple more minutes, but I guess I did have one for you, Alexa. Is, you know, obviously with 2020 being the way it was, and going into 2021 here, what are some short-term goals you're looking at to accomplish here in 2021? Because, you know, obviously taking everything online and doing the online database and tracking and everything like that. That's obviously a big initiative. And granted, if you can get it accomplished in 2021, great. But I have a feeling there might be some smaller steps along the way before we get the full thing going.
Yeah, definitely. Our initial, like what I'm working on right now, and I mean, this piece of it is just me. I'm still learning a lot from Barry, and I'm learning more and more about our programs and trying to witness what's being done so that I can better communicate it with this other group of stakeholders. But my one of my biggest kind of projects over the next several months is web development. So I am using, this isn't part of my introduction, but I have a degree from USD in biology and sustainability. But I do have experience doing like coding and marketing and those sorts of things as well. And so I am building that website and getting all of our social media channels live and having a sort of a plan for engagement, you know, through social channels, and having like very consistent schedules for posting and things like that. Those are sort of my you know, goals to get done by this, like the end of this spring or the early summer coming, and just have things ready so that during the summer season we can do a lot of sharing of the stuff that we're doing.
Excellent. Yeah. Did get a couple more questions in here, but Jay did come in with an assist here, and I probably should have known about this to the original question about the upper Big Sioux River watershed. There is actually conveniently named the Upper Big Sioux Watershed Project, and that's actually out of Watertown. And I've actually worked with that group a couple times since I am from Watertown, so I probably should have known that. But at any rate, yes, there is the Upper Big Sioux Watershed Project out of Watertown. That would encompass that summit area. But
yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave them out. Yes, our we have this. We're doing the Big Sioux River project just as a. We don't want to include central or lower, just as it gets confusing as you're marketing it to a large, you know, a long name gets confusing when you're trying to just. I don't want to confuse anyone. So, but yeah, the Upper Big Sioux River watershed project is doing really awesome work as well. So,
and we did have a couple other questions come in here. One being, how much coordination is there with the Friends of the Big Sioux River or any other particular projects?
Yeah, so far we're still in very much the planning stages of some of those sorts of things. I know Friends of the Big Sioux currently does some water quality sampling voluntarily, I believe, for East Dakota. They have a lot of other awesome like initiatives like trash cleanups and things like that, and we would be looking to partner on some of those things with them, but also to sort of establish ourselves as our own group as well within the watershed. But yeah, we definitely want to foster that collaboration because there are many groups that are contributing, you know, to this vast project that we couldn't do on our own.
Sure. And I guess with the time we got left, we got one final question here. It should be a fairly simple one. Maybe you even mentioned it in your presentation. I can't remember, but when did you say the website was going live?
Yes.
If you have a date.
Yes. The would be that seam between late spring and early summer. I'm like, my personal goal is for like the very end of May. You can be looking for it, and we do have website like links and things, but it's just a nice coming soon you know thing right now, so I'm not bothering to share that website title at the time being.
Oh, Jay snuck in one more here. Let's see. Oh, okay. He's just once again clarifying, Friends of the Big Sioux River have been part of the project steering committee for a long time. The more folks involved, the better.
Awesome.
All
Thank you
right.
for this, Jay.
Cody Rolfus grew up in Spencer, Iowa, and after graduating high school, attended SDSU, majoring in wildlife and fisheries science. Graduated from SDSU in 2015, worked several different seasonal positions within South Dakota Game Fish and Parks before coming on the board with Pheasants Forever in 2017. He enjoys being outdoors and has a wife and welcomed their first baby July of this year. Corey, you can take it over.
All righty, thanks, Troy. Yeah, so today I'm gonna kind of cover our Farm Bill Biologist program, kind of what we do, the partners we work with, and some of the programs that we work with to try and address these water quality concerns. So first off, the Farm Bill Biologist program within the state, there's 14 positions throughout the state. We also have 4 coordinating wildlife biologists that work with easements, a soil health biologist, and then also a precision ag specialist. What we do as Farm Bill biologists, the mission of Pheasants Forever is all about habitat and putting more habitat and better quality habitat on the ground. And we do that in our positions by working with landowners to help them meet their goals on their land, or to help steer them towards programs that might fit best for them. And then outreach, holding educational events or youth pollinator events, etc. I should back up. My home office is out of Flandreau. We work in the USDA NRCS offices. My main counties are Brookings and Moody County. And then I also cover kind of all the way down to Union County. And we do have a biologist up in Watertown too, so he would be working in areas that would affect this Big Sioux River watershed as well. Programs we utilize to address several water quality concerns within the USDA. The big one that we work a lot with is the Conservation Reserve Program. There's easements such as WRP, the Wetland Reserve Program. There's Environmental Quality Incentive Program, and also the Conservation Stewardship Program. I'm going to cover mostly CRP, WRP, because those are the 2 that I work with the most, and then a couple examples of EQIP as well. And then we also work with the Game Fish and Parks private lands programs, which they will offer cost share to plant grasses or trees, grazing infrastructure type things. And then there's also a sort of newer program, the Second Century Working Lands program, that I will cover briefly as well. Not going to get into the weeds too much on this. I think we all kind of know how the wildlife habitat works for water quality, and the main one I'm going to be focusing on today is buffers, which, as a lot of us know, the vegetative buffers are critical in filtering out pollutants from whether it be crop fields, livestock waste, etc. The first program I'm going to talk about is the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP. There's 2 different signups within the CRP program. The first one is the continuous CRP, and as it sounds, that is open on a continual basis. And these 4 practices within the continuous signup are 4 of the main ones that we would use within the Big Sioux watershed, and are the ones we would implement. There is a general CRP signup, which with the new Farm Bill, there is signups for those. There will be one starting in January. The continuous signup works a lot with the wetland practices. The general is more any cropland is eligible, but it is on a ranking basis. So some examples, and the picture here is kind of what we're going after. You can see that definitive line there where there was a buffer on that stream, whether that be 5, 10 feet, whatever. And then we're adding that additional buffer through CRP and adding water quality benefits as well as wildlife. Here's an example of a project in Moody County that I just worked on this last year. And this was actually a project with Barry Berg in the East Dakota Water Development District through their SRAM program. So the stuff in the yellow outlined all went into CRP through filter strips or a wetland restoration. Everything inside of there that you can see went into that program, the East Dakota program through SRAM. So all of that you can see there is protected and will have a great benefit on the water quality. And this is the West Pipestone Creek, I believe. Another example, this is a small tributary to the Pipestone Creek. This was a filter strip that was implemented 2 years ago. The imagery on the computer wasn't updated to see that some of these have been planted to grass since then. But this is another one where you can see we're buffering that water channel more and taking out some of those pollutants. Here's another one. This is actually along the Big Sioux River. This one went into the general sign up this past year. I think it was almost 100 acres. It's right up on the Moody Brookings line. And this is going to be a great block for wildlife habitat. And towards the south end, you can kind of see some circle patterns. Those are oxbows and stuff that are normally pretty wet and flow into the Big Sioux River. So this was a good piece to get in to protect the Big Sioux River. Here's another piece that went into marginal pasture land, which this piece was normally grazed every year. Very short grass, cattle in the water. So we enrolled it into the marginal pasture land, which basically gives the landowner a certain payment every year to take those cattle off of there. And then we don't have those resource concerns. Here's a wetland, a pretty generic wetland restoration one. When I first started, this was one of the first projects I worked on. You can see those wetland areas. Those were basically just a ditch running through there. We use CRP, the wetland restoration practice, to restore those wetlands, get the hydrology back to its natural function, and then plant buffers around there as well. Here's kind of the goal of a before and after picture. You can see on the left that a lot of that wetland is farmed through or has been farmed through in the past. This picture was taken in a wet year. And then on the right, that is after vegetation is established and taking away a lot of those runoff issues and all the other resource concerns. WRP or easements. My work on these programs is fairly limited. And basically, this program is meant to restore and protect wetlands for a long period of time. There is 30-year easements or perpetual easements. My work with this program is landowners can get compatible use agreements to utilize or do some sort of habitat management or food plots, something along those lines. And a few examples of those. This is kind of a picturesque easement. Is more of a pothole easement, but it's planted with a very diverse grass forb mixture, providing lots of wildlife habitat. Here is an example from Moody County. This is the Big Sioux River, and then it's a section and a quarter of land that is all an easement besides a little chunk over there on the west side. But this is all in perpetual easement and will be protected from here on out. So something like this is great for the Big Sioux River and all the wetlands you can see within there as well. Here's another snapshot from up in Brookings County. This is also along the Big Sioux River. Everything outlined in blue here is in perpetual easement. So you can see there, these easements take up large tracts of land, or can take up large tracts of land along Big Sioux River or other wetlands. That can be very beneficial to the river itself. The Environmental Quality Incentive Program, a basic overview of that is it'll pay cost share to implement conservation practices, whether that be grazing infrastructure, if you're talking pipeline, tanks, fencing, cover crops, or waterways are some of the main practices in our area. Here's one example that I have worked on up in Moody County. I believe this is just a couple miles west of the Big Sioux River, but you can see there's a lot of wetlands that were farmed through on this piece. And what we did is through EQIP, we put fence up, a cross fence going across the middle there, and then a pipeline and tank in the middle. And then we seeded it all to grass, and the landowners are gonna use that and as part of their grazing rotation. So while there'll still be cattle in there, adding that freshwater tank, that'll keep the cows out of the wetlands for the most part. And this will be a great piece for wildlife and water quality. The Second Century Working Lands Program. This is the newer program I mentioned earlier that Governor Noem set up when she went into office. It is meant, so it must be cropland. The landowner will get $150 an acre one-time payment. Seed provided for free, and it's a 5-year contract. And there is partial hanging grazing allowed after the second growing season. The reason why it's a working lands program is it's just, the way I look at it is trying to assist landowners to try and get some of the marginal cropland in the state back into grass, and therefore back into grazing rotations, haying rotations, what have you. A good assist on that. We do have a couple of these projects in this area. This one is up in Brookings County between the two fields. It's, I think it was like 120 acres. And this particular landowner wanted to take this stuff out of production because it was very wet ground. And this all flows down. Lake Sinai is just to the south of this. And this was planted last year and went out there this year, and it's a beautiful stand of grass, lots of wildlife, and in a very wildlife rich area around Lake Sinai there. And of course, the benefits to Lake Sinai as well. This one is also in Brookings County, north of Brookings. The Big Sioux River would be just a mile or two to the west. And this piece, the water all flows that way. And this was all planted to the Second Century Working Lands Program grass mix. And the landowner is very happy with it, and it's looking pretty good as well. New opportunities. If you were on for Alexa's presentation, you heard about this. It's a partnership between Pheasants Forever and the East Dakota Water Development District. It's a perpetual easement program focused on the Big Sioux River. And it can be the Big Sioux River or a named tributary to the Big Sioux River. And there is some annual haying and grazing and other habitat management that is allowed. And the two main contacts for this, other than myself, would be my supervisor, Matt Morlock, and Barry Berg. And other than that, that's pretty much all I have today. if there's any questions. And my contact info there as well if you don't feel comfortable asking questions on here.